Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening to you. We are here live again, live stream on Facebook. My name is Jonan Kandwanaho, and I'm the Managing Director at Jonaki Holdings Limited. At Jonaki Holdings, we do money lending. We offer credit, affordable credit. So if you have a business or you want a personal loan, you have an emergency, we sort you out. We also have cars and bridal cars for hire. If you have colleagues from any other country or from around, you want to take them around in the parks and all that, you want beautiful cars, we do that. We also offer coaching and business mentoring. We walk with you the journey of business. So that's what Jonaki Holdings Limited is about. So you can always check us out on our website. It's always a pleasure to see you every Friday from 5:30 to 6 p.m. I always look forward to sharing with you what the Lord has blessed me with. You could be having knowledge yourself, you could be having information yourself that you'd wish to share with your colleague. So social media is one of the platforms that we can use to share with the public, with colleagues. Because Proverbs says in the Bible that iron sharpens iron. So we have to sharpen each other. So I have passion for business, and I come here that we sharpen each other in the area of business. So that's why I schedule my time every Friday from 5:30 to 6 to come and share with you what the Lord has put on my heart. So it's a pleasure to have you. You're very welcome. And today we have an interesting topic. Very, very interesting topic. Cow fattening as a business. If you've been noticing of recent, I've been highlighting the ventures that we participate in, or that we are engaged in, and that I'm personally engaged in. And I put the key defining terms as a business. For example, last Friday I did money lending as a business. And why I emphasize it as a business is that some people do businesses as by the ways. Someone does a business as a by the way. He commits his time, he commits his money, he commits his resources, but he still does a business as a by the way. It's not right, it's not fair. If something is worth committing your time, if something is worth committing your resources in terms of money, in terms of capital, land, or anything else, then it is worth to be run as a business. Meaning that if it's going to be run as a business, then it has to have return on investment. The cost of production minus the final profit, the gross sales, the amount of money that you make after making a sale, should make business sense. Or else you should not commit your time, you should not commit your resources, you should even not commit your conscience, your mind, thinking about that business. So that's why I've been running this series, money lending as a business, cow fattening as a business today, and more are yet to come that I am involved in, that I'd like to share my experience with you on those businesses. And this information that I'm sharing with you is not the ultimate, but it's just my experience, what I've learned as I've been going through these businesses. So today's topics, I'll delve in straight, is cow fattening as a business. So some people have been running cow fattening as a by the way, money lending as a by the way. Any other venture, you can put your business there as a by the way. Meaning you do it half-fuzzedly. You commit halfway. So my principle is, if you're to commit wholly, commit 100%. If something is worth your time, something is worth your resources, your money, then you had better commit. Now I'd like to define cow fattening. I don't think everyone knows what it is. So cow fattening is feeding your cattle, or making the conditions for your cattle favorable for it to gain weight, so that you can sell at a higher price. So ideally it's buying at a lower price, creating good environment, feeding your cattle very well, then you sell at a higher price. That's basically cow fattening. There are some few key details that I've learned along the way that I wanted to share, and I still would like to share with you today. Now, there are different categories of cows. They could be dairy and they could be beef cattle. It could be dairy or beef. And then in the beef now, because now we are targeting the beef, we could have the bulls or we could have the real cows. You see that? Meaning that if you're thinking cow fattening, first of all, you should rule it out that you could use dairy cattle, but it would be better that you use beef cattle. Because your target is to buy this cattle at a lower price, provide good environment, feed the cattle very well, then you sell at a higher price. So the target is the beef. The target is the beef. So if you're selecting your cows as you're going to stock, you should be certain of the cows you're looking out for. Because even the prices for dairy cattle, if you're selling them for eating as beef, is not as high as selling your cattle, as you're selling your beef cattle. Meaning the beef cattle are on market, they are highly priced than the dairy cattle. So it should come out clearly, if you want to do cow fattening, that you identify cattle meant for beef. This even actually applies to poultry as well, but yes, today's is beef. So you have to be very, very critical, because it will have an implication on your return on investment. So that aside, we go to the bulls. Now, there's a particular age of bulls that you're supposed to be looking at before you stock. Bulls which are already mature and old enough have a low fat conversion ratio than bulls which are still a little young, maybe 2.5 years. So it is important that you look out for bulls that are a little young, maybe 2.5 years, so that you can actually graze them for some time and they can actually get fat. That is very, very key. So you have to look for bulls which are a little younger, maybe 2.5 years, graze them so that they can actually grow some fat, and then you actually sell them at a higher price. So it is important that you select a particular age of bulls that are going to graze for fattening. You remember our principle is you buy at a low price, graze for some time, then you sell at a higher price. So I'm pointing out the key areas you're supposed to be looking out for before you start investing in such a business. So there are some key things that people have been underlooking, that people have been sidelining, that people have not been looking at. Someone tells you that I do cow fattening. See, I buy a cow at maybe 800 and I sell it at 1.5 or 1.4, 1.2. We tend to compute figures, we tend to compute numbers on the face value, not incorporating in the costs of production. In almost every industry, there is a cost of production. Just like there's a cost of production for producing soap, just that there is a cost of production for producing clothes. Any other thing, there's also a cost of production for cow fattening. There are some costs that are involved. And people quote their numbers, forgetting the costs that they put in. Now, there are some costs that you might not be able to monetize or attach a figure on them. For example, time, your commitment of time. That's why I emphasize that before you commit in a business, you had better commit. Because even your time is precious to commit in a business that you're not willing to commit into, or that you're not willing to treat as a main, not as a by the way. So there are some key costs of production that you have to observe, that you have to note down. The Bible says in Luke 14:28-30 that if you plan to do something, have a plan and a budget for it. If you plan to construct a house, have a budget and a plan for it. Or else you'll reach in the middle of the way and you'll fail to finish that house, and people, the public, the community will laugh at you, will mock at you. So even the Bible says it. So if you want to incorporate your cost of production, sit down and plan. Have a budget. Yes, I want to start this kind of number of cows for fattening. What are the costs involved? What are the costs involved? So I'm going to highlight the key costs that people have been underlooking and that have an implication at the final figure that you get as a return on investment. As the final figure that you get as a return on investment. So the first key point to start with is that sit down and plan. Develop a budget for that. And as you're doing that plan, there's a number of cattle below which you might not get feasible return on investment. If you want to treat this as a business, it is better that you start with a particular number of cattle. And based on my experience, the modest number that you can actually start with to realize something is at least 30. Start with at least 30. You can do 30, you can do 50. The best would be 50, but if you have less capital, start with 30 cows. If it is bulls, start with 30, because the cost of production is low. They are a little affordable. If it is cows, you could start with 30, but 50 would be better. But for the minimum, to have good returns, 30 is a good number. Now you might be there and you say, Jonan, 30 is a huge number for the amount of money that I'm looking at. Partnership. I did a live stream on partnership. And why we've not performed very well in Uganda or even in Africa or even in some parts of the world is that we tend not to want to partner with other people. We tend to be isolated. We tend to be doing our things in cocoons. I want to do it individually. I want to do it as mine. It's my thing. It's my business. It's my company. It's my venture. Not knowing that you're serving the public. So I did a live stream. You look it up on YouTube on partnership. It is very, very key that you look out for a partner. If Jonan has 15 million and maybe Simon has 15 million, we can partner and do business together to have good returns on investment. Yet if I did 15 cows, because I have limited capital, I would not have good return on investment, because there are some costs of production that reduce because you're partnering together. I'll give you an example of transport. If I was going to transport 15 cows, it would be the same cost as transporting 25 cows or 30 cows. Meaning that now the cost is embedded in transporting, but it's one thing. So you have reduced the cost of production. Meaning that this is going to translate to the final profits that you're going to make at the sales, as you sell out. So you have no excuse. We have circles, we have investment clubs. As a matter of fact, I'm in quite a number of them. So you have the opportunity to partner with your colleagues of the same mind, I repeat, because a partner might also disorganize you. So that you can make ends meet, so that you can make things happen, so that you can stock a reasonable number for fattening. So the minimum number, we agree, the best is 50 cows. If it is bulls, if it is cows, 50. But if you're constrained on resources, start with at least 30. So that is a key point. The other key point are the costs that you should have at the back of your mind. Now, for the people that we usually mentor, that I usually coach, in some of the things that I do, we have an Excel. We have an Excel that outlines key costs, key practical costs that you actually incur if you want to fatten cows, if you want fatten cattle. So these are the key areas that you have to look at. First of all is transport. Now you consider transport if the cows are coming from point A to point B. If where you intend to graze your cows from is distant from where you're buying them from, you have to incorporate in transport costs. It's one of the leading costs, almost second to leading, transport costs. So as you're thinking of stocking your cattle, think of transport costs. Transport. And this transport involves the times when there's quarantine, you have to deal with the police. If there's quarantine, you're not supposed to move animals. That means you have to be patient so that quarantine is ceased. So there is open market. There are lots of considerations that come with transport, but I categorize them as transport costs. So if you're thinking of fattening cattle, have at the back of your mind, if you don't have them already on the farm, if you've not bred them on your farm, you have to buy them from point A to point B, where you're going to graze them from. So you have to have transport costs in your mind. It has to be on your Excel as you plan, as you budget. Key point number 2 as a cost of production is land. Now there are 2 categories of land. There are people who have been grazing on their own lands, thinking that, I have land, so my cost of production on the side of land is 0. And I don't seem to get it well. On the side of land, whether the land is yours or not, there's a cost of production on land. Because even if it is yours, you bought it using money. Even if you inherited it, it is still capital, it is money. So you have to compute it. So if you're hiring land as well, you have to have that cost of land. You have to have it as a cost, land. So either way, you have to consider it. On average, some areas it could be 100,000 per year per cow. In some areas, 150. In some areas, 200, 250 per annum per cow. So you have to have it as a cost. And unless you have it as a cost, it will affect your returns. So land is very, very key. That's why it's important as you're seeking out the partners, as you partner with someone, if both of you don't have land, fine, you can hire out the land. But if one of you has land and you have the money, you can see how to juggle around, such as stock, but you also compute with the land. So it can cover part of the cost, but it's a cost of production, land. And it is very, very pertinent. Now, I want to show you how you can maximize on land. For us who have been fattening cattle, we've been doing free range. You have land, maybe 100 acres, maybe 1 square mile. You put your cattle there and you just graze. Buy, come and stock, and you graze on the land if it is yours. But also you have to capture the cost of production. If you're hiring the land, it's still the same thing. However, you can maximize on the land. If you don't have plenty of land, you may have to consider a different mode that is not common yet. It is called pen fattening. You fatten from the pen. If you have 5 acres, 3 acres, 10 acres, you can confine the cows in that particular piece of land and you fatten them. However, it also comes with a cost which might not be commensurate or might not be as high as the cost of buying land or hiring land. And that is the cost of feeding, because when you have a vast chunk of land, maybe a square mile or 100 acres, cows move. It's a free range thing. So cows move from point A to point B to point C to feed. But if you confine them in a small piece of land, saving on the hiring of the land, you have to incur some bit of cost on feeding the cattle. So you can feed them with grains, you can feed them, since maize is cheaper nowadays, you can feed them with hay or silage. But the advantage that you have, the plus that you have with pen fattening or caging them in a particular fence, confined piece of land, is that the fat conversion ratio is not as high, because cows that move tend to convert the fat, tend to burn the fat, just like human beings. If you're walking, you burn the fat. meaning that you don't fatten, and your intention is to fatten. You bought while it was malnourished, now you want it to fatten so that you can sell it while it is huge and fat. So the less movement it has, the better for your cow. So the pen fattening is very minimal in Uganda, maybe in Africa, but it's one of the key areas that you might have to look at if you don't have a huge chunk of land. But you have to incorporate in the feeding as a cost of production. That means you have to have the feeds as a cost of production. So have it at the back of your mind that if you want to keep your cattle confined, then you have to think of the feeding. The plus that you have is that you have a timeline in which the cows can actually fatten. You have a timeline in which the cows can fatten, maybe 3 to 4 months. The other cost of production is medication. Because as soon as you buy the cows, you have to deworm them, you have to apply multivitamins, and you have to dehydrate. In case there is ECF, you have to inject them with ECF drugs, maybe pen and strip. Lots of drugs that you have to actually put, that you have to stock. So drugs are also pertinent. Then we also have operational costs. A person who looks after those cows. And it has to be a trusted person because he might either steal them or not treat them well or even connive with the thieves. They have to have a trusted person, a herdsman. So those are operational costs. Food, herdsman, salary, blah, blah, transport, fuel, your cost, even airtime. Those are the costs that you should have at the point, from the point go. You might think you're loading calls per month, but there are some additional costs that you could load airtime to call. It is a cost. It affects the cost of production, the final profits that you get after selling. So you have to consider them. Now for cage, going back a little bit, for pen or cage fattening, you should target a little young cows. If they are bulls, target a little young bulls. If they are cows, target a little bit young cows. And why that is because they tend to fatten very fast. Because when the cow is born, it still has a muscle and a bone. The carcass has muscle and a bone. But it reaches a particular point when it starts accumulating the fat. And that's why it's very key to know at what point or what bracket of or what age of cows you should target, what age of cattle you should target. That's why it is very, very pertinent. So I'll go straight to the details since my time is almost fast spent. Go to the details. First of all, for cows, you fatten them on average between 3 and 4 months. So you buy them, if you buy them in January, that means you look at 3 to 4 months. So in a year, you could have 4 sessions of buying, fattening, and selling. Buying, fattening, and selling. And that's the advantage. Though the production cost for cows is high, because you might find an average cow at 1.2 million or 1 million, and yet bulls are in 600, 800. So one of the key things that the advantage that you have with the cows is it's a short period, so you can do several sessions of fattening and selling off. So there's a bit of cash flow and the frequency is a little high. So you tend to be benefiting higher, probably compared to bulls. Though the stocking costs are a little high. If you're buying cows, the stocking costs are a little high. And then 2, for bulls, you graze them the period of between 10 months to 12 months. Between 10 months to 12 months. But there are lots of things that come into play. At what age have you bought them at? How do they look? What's the size and all those things? Because if you buy them at a wrong age, it might affect the time period that you graze them at. You might tend to take a longer period of time than when you bought them at a moderate or an appropriate age, maybe 2.5 years for bulls. So you have to make a choice. Are you going to do cows? Are you going to do bulls? You have to decide. You have to decide. So the other key thing that you have to look into is your target at the final point, because it's input, process, output. So at the output level, you have to look at seasonality. Seasons are usually good November, December, Christmas Eve, or during the festives. So meaning that if you're stocking the bulls and they're going to run for 10 months, you have to know that you're going to stock in January. There are periods which are ripe for stocking. For example, when the children are going back to school, there are people who tend to sell their cows. They tend to sell their bulls. So the stocking time is ripe during that time. But also, if you're stocking bulls, you have to know that I'm grazing them for 10 months, so eventually it will ripple off to December and it will be Christmas season. So the prices will go a little higher. So as you're stocking, you have to have this at the back of your mind. When do you expect to sell? But also, if you're stocking, you should know, because you'll have made a decision between cows or bulls. If it is bulls, you have to know that there are some additional costs that you have to do along the way during the process. For example, you'll need to salt them for a long period of time. You need to medicate them. You need to spray them. You need all that period of time putting in, but you intend to harvest. So the average for bulls in Uganda is that you buy it at 800,000. Usually after a year, you sell it at about 1.5 million. So when you compare in the costs, you might find that you bought a bull, including the stocking costs, including the transport costs, including a few operational costs. On average, you can say 200,000 will cater for that bull for a year. So meaning that you have bought a bull at 1 million, so you're going to sell it at 1.5. And you have a margin on each bull of about 500,000. Now these things that I'm telling you is I've been doing them and I'm still doing them. So I'm speaking them out at a practical point of view. So there are several attributes, like I gave a disclaimer, that come into play, because at what age have you bought that bull? So on average, on each bull, you can make an average of between 350 and maybe 500. So you have to make an informed decision of what to consider. And then for cows, I've told you 4 times in a year. You can graze them between 3 to 4 months. Stocking costs for a cow, if it is priced at 1 million, you count 1.2. But if you're selling, you might 1.7 or 1.8, sometimes 2 million. But you realize that also the frequency is a lot. So it will be good to land, hire it for a longer period of time so that you can increase the frequency of stocking, selling, stocking. That's how you're going to benefit from the cows. There are key pointers as I conclude. For cows specifically. You might buy cows, by the time it gets to 2 or 3 months on your farm, it produces. Now, when a cow produces on your farm, it is a disadvantage because it will take longer to fatten. Even if you kill the young one, even if you sell the young one, it will still take a little bit of time. So meaning that as you're stocking your cows, you have to make sure that they are not almost producing. So you need an expert in this area. So that you can stock when you're very certain that in a period of 4 months, they will not have produced before you actually sell them. So have it at the back of your mind as you're going to deal in cows. Quite interesting topics, quite interesting sharing. I have huge information on this since I've been doing it, and I have a lot of information that I'm sharing with you guys. And it's still a lot, but I see time is fast spent. So I'd advise that in case you want more information, get in touch. But I hope you note down the key points that I've highlighted that you have to look into, that you have to consider before you do cow fattening as a business. So you can check out our website, www.jonakiholdingslimited.com, or you can contact me if you have particular interest in this area, and we shall walk this journey together. Thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure having you every evening, every Friday, 5:30 to 6. God richly bless you. I see you, colleagues, and as I've always emphasized, if you learn one or two things and apply, I'll be the happiest. But if you learn these things, you commit your time, you listen in, and you do not implement them, it will be a disservice not only to yourself, but also to me. Because I commit this time to the public as I give back to the public. And I'll be very happy if you implement it. Thank you so much, and God richly bless you. Enjoy your Friday and enjoy your weekend. May the Lord keep you in perfect health. Thank you.